At exactly 10:47 IEM on a Tuesday morning, a woman walked into one of the most powerful offices in Manhattan, carrying two secrets that would destroy a billionaire's perfect world in less than 5 minutes. Have you ever had someone from your past show up unexpectedly with news that changed everything? Maybe it was an old friend, a former colleague, or someone you barely remembered. That moment when your carefully organized life suddenly gets turned upside down by a single conversation? Well, what you're about to hear is the story of Phillip Kingsley, a man who thought he had complete control over his destiny. He built an empire worth billions, commanded respect from world leaders, and lived behind walls of security that kept his private life absolutely private. His name appeared on Forbes lists and charity galas, but nobody knew the real man behind the headline. The Kingsley Tower dominated Manhattan's skyline like a glass monument to success. 85 floors of pure power, where million-dollar deals happened with a handshake, and entire industries shifted based on one man's decisions. Phillip's office sat at the very top, protected by security codes, executive assistants, and enough protocol to make visiting heads of state wait. This was a man who scheduled his life down to the minute. Board meetings, charity events, business dinners, everything planned, everything controlled, everything perfect. He'd worked 18-hour days for 20 years to build this kingdom, and he protected it like his life depended on it. If stories about life's most unexpected turns fascinate you, hit that subscribe button right now, because you won't want to miss what happens next. You see, Phillip thought he knew every detail of his own story. He remembered every major decision, every important relationship, every significant moment that shaped his empire. His memory was sharp, his records were flawless, and his past was exactly what he believed it to be. But here's the thing about the past. Sometimes it holds secrets that even the most powerful people don't know about themselves. Sometimes those secrets walk through your office door when you least expect them, accompanied by two small children who share your eyes. The woman standing in his doorway that morning was about to reveal a truth that would force Phillip to question everything he thought he knew about his own life. A truth that would make him choose between the empire he'd built and the family he never knew existed. Are you ready to find out what she said? Phillip was deep in quarterly reports when his assistant's voice came through the intercom with an urgency he rarely heard from Tessa. In 5 years of working together, she'd handled celebrities, politicians, and Fortune 500 CEOs without missing a beat. Her voice never wavered, never showed stress. But this morning was different. "Sir, there's a woman here to see you. She says it's urgent, and she's brought children with her. She won't leave." Phillip looked up from his financial projections, his pen hovering over his signature. "I don't have any appointments this morning. Who is she?" "She won't give a name, sir, but she insists she knows you personally. And she has twins with her. 2 young children. They're sitting in the reception area right now." Children? In his office building? The Kingsley Tower wasn't exactly the kind of place where families showed up for casual visits. His building had corporate offices, investment firms, and high-end legal practices. Nobody brought kids here. Phillip felt his carefully structured morning beginning to shift off course. "Did she say what this is about?" "No, sir, but—" Tessa paused, which was unusual for her. "She seems determined. She's been waiting for almost an hour, and she keeps looking at those children like she's preparing for something important." Something important. Phillip's mind started running through possibilities. Disgruntled former employee? Charity case that somehow bypassed normal channels? Someone trying to get media attention by targeting him? He'd seen it all before. What does she look like? Mid-30s, brown hair, simple clothing. The children appear to be around 6 years old, a boy and a girl. They're well-behaved, quiet. But, sir, there's something about the way she's waiting. She's not going anywhere. Phillip stood up and walked to his office window, looking down at the bustling street below. Random people didn't just show up at his office with children. His security was too tight, his appointments too carefully screened. Someone had let her through, which meant she'd convinced the front desk that she belonged here. "Has she mentioned anything else? Any details about why she needs to see me?" She said, Tessa's voice dropped slightly. "She said you'd want to know about this before it becomes public knowledge." Public knowledge. Those words sent a chill through Philip's morning routine. In his world, anything that threatened to become public knowledge usually meant scandal, media attention, or legal trouble, sometimes all three. He returned to his desk, his quarterly reports suddenly seeming less important. A woman he didn't recognize, with 2 children, claiming to know something that could become public. The scenarios running through his mind weren't comforting. "Send her in," he finally said. "Sir?" "Send her in, Tessa. Let's find out what this is about." As he straightened his tie and cleared his desk, Philip had no idea that the next few minutes would completely rewrite the story of his life. The door was about to open on his biggest secret. The double doors opened, and Philip's world shifted on its axis. A woman stepped inside, flanked by 2 small children who clung to her hands like lifelines. She had dark hair pulled back loosely, wearing simple jeans and a navy sweater, nothing that suggested wealth or status. But her posture held a quiet determination that immediately caught Philip's attention. The children were stunning. The boy had curious eyes and tousled brown hair, while the girl clutched a small stuffed rabbit and studied the office with wide, intelligent eyes. They both had an unmistakable quality that made Philip's chest tighten without understanding why. "Mr. Kingsley," the woman said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I'm Olivia Marston. These are my children, Daniel and Amelia." Philip gestured toward the chairs across from his massive desk. "Please, sit. What can I do for you?" Olivia settled the children into their chairs, then looked directly into Philip's eyes. No hesitation, no small talk, no gentle lead-up to whatever she'd come to say. "Daniel and Amelia are yours." The words hit the office like a physical force. Philip felt his breathing stop for a moment, his hands gripping the edge of his desk. The quarterly reports scattered as he leaned forward. "That's impossible." "I know how this sounds," Olivier continued, reaching into her purse. "I know you probably don't remember me, but we met at the Children's Hope Foundation Gala in October 2013. She pulled out a photograph. Slightly faded but clear. It showed a younger version of Philip in his tuxedo, standing beside a woman who looked exactly like Olivia, both of them smiling at a charity event. Philip's mind raced backward through years of similar events, trying to place this moment, this woman, this night. "I was a volunteer coordinator," Olivia explained. "We talked for almost an hour about the Foundation's work with foster children. You told me about growing up in the system yourself, how it shaped your commitment to helping kids." Flashes of memory began surfacing. That particular gala had been different, more personal than his usual appearances. He remembered feeling unusually open that night, sharing stories he typically kept private, but the details remained frustratingly vague. After the event, Olivia's voice softened. "We went for coffee." One thing led to another. "You probably had a dozen similar evenings that year. For me, it was—" She glanced at her children. "It was the night that changed everything." Philip studied the photograph, then looked at Daniel and Amelia. The boy's eyes held the same intense focus Philip saw in his own mirror every morning. The girl's chin had a stubborn set that reminded him of his own childhood determination. "I don't remember," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Olivia nodded, as if she'd expected this response. "I didn't think you would. That's why I brought this." She handed him a sealed envelope marked with the logo of a respected medical laboratory. Philip's hands shook slightly as he opened it, scanning the technical language and statistical probabilities until he found the crucial line, "Probability of paternity, 99.97%. The numbers swam before his eyes, charts, graphs, genetic markers, all confirming what this woman claimed. All proving that his carefully controlled life had been missing 2 of the most important pieces. Have you ever had a moment where your entire understanding of yourself suddenly became incomplete? Where you realized that the story you'd been telling about your own life was missing entire chapters? Philip looked at Daniel, who was quietly drawing on a notepad, completely unaware that he was sitting in his father's office. He looked at Amelia, who was watching him with an expression of cautious hope that broke something inside his chest. Why now? He managed to ask. Why are you telling me this now? Olivia's composure finally cracked slightly. Because I don't have a choice anymore. The weight of those words settled over the office. Phillip realized this wasn't about money, scandal, or media attention. This was about something far more fundamental. Something that would require him to completely redefine what it meant to be Phillip Kingsley. His empire, his reputation, his perfectly controlled existence. None of it had prepared him for this moment. None of it mattered compared to the two small faces looking at him from across his desk. If you've ever wondered how quickly a single truth can change everything, keep watching, because what Olivia said next would force Phillip to choose between the life he'd built and the family he never knew existed. The confession was complete. Now came the real test. Phillip set the DNA results on his desk, his mind still processing the scientific proof of his fatherhood. But something in Olivia's expression told him there was more. Something that explained the urgency, the timing, the desperate courage it must have taken to walk into his office. "There's another reason I'm here," Olivia said, her voice carrying a weight that made Phillip's attention sharpen. "Something I need you to understand before we go any further." She glanced at Daniel and Amelia, who were quietly occupied with the drawing materials Tessa had brought them. Her next words came out carefully measured, as if she'd rehearsed this conversation countless times. "Last year I was diagnosed with a rare neurological condition. The doctors call it progressive multifocal leukoencephalopathy. It's—" She paused, searching for words that wouldn't frighten her children. "It's terminal." The office fell completely silent except for the soft scratching of Daniel's crayon on paper. Phillip felt the ground shift beneath him again. But this time it wasn't about his own world changing. It was about understanding the incredible strength of the woman sitting across from him. "How long?" he asked quietly. 18 months, maybe 2 years if I'm lucky. The progression has been faster than they initially predicted." Olivia's hands remained steady, but Phillip could see the effort it took. "I've spent the last 8 months trying to figure out how to handle this. I don't have family, Mr. Kingsley. My parents died in a car accident when I was 22, and I was an only child." Phillip began to understand the magnitude of what she was facing, and what she was asking of him. This wasn't about disrupting his life or seeking financial support. This was about 2 children who were about to lose their mother and had nowhere else to go. "I never wanted to be a burden," Olivia continued. "I never wanted to complicate your life or create problems for you. For 7 years, I raised Daniel and Amelia on my own, and I was content with that choice. I worked as a teacher, we had our little apartment, and we were happy." She looked at her children with a love so fierce it was almost overwhelming to witness. "But now I have to think beyond what I want. I have to think about what happens to them when I'm gone." Phillip found himself studying Daniel and Amelia with completely new eyes. These weren't just children who shared his DNA. They were 2 human beings who were about to face an unimaginable loss, and their mother was fighting to ensure they'd have someone to catch them when they fell. "You could have contacted me years ago," Phillip said. "Why wait until now?" "Because I wanted to raise them myself," Olivia replied without hesitation. "I wanted them to have a normal childhood, without the complications that come with your world. No media attention, no security details. No questions about why Mommy and Daddy weren't together. Just a simple life, with bedtime stories and scraped knees and piano lessons." She gestured toward the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. "But I can't give them what they're going to need now. I can't give them stability or security or a future. I can't protect them from what's coming." The reality hit Phillip like a physical blow. This woman had spent 7 years protecting his children from the chaos of his public life, raising them with love and sacrifice, never asking for anything. And now, facing her own mortality, she was placing their welfare above her own pride. "I'm not asking you to love them," Olivia said softly. "I'm not even asking you to change your entire life for them. I'm just asking you to be there, to make sure they're safe and cared for when I can't do it anymore." Phillip looked at Daniel, who was showing Amelia his dinosaur drawing, and at Amelia, who was explaining something about her stuffed rabbit. in the patient way that suggested this was a daily conversation between siblings. If this story is touching something deep inside you, show some love with a like, because what happens next will show you what real courage looks like. This wasn't about scandal or reputation or media management. This was about two children who deserved a chance at happiness, and a dying mother who was willing to trust the father they'd never known to give them that chance. Everything had just become infinitely more complicated, and infinitely more important. Philip stood up and walked to his window, looking out over the city that had been his kingdom for 2 decades. Behind him he could hear Daniel explaining to Amelia about different types of dinosaurs, their voices carrying the innocent enthusiasm that only children possess. When he turned back around, his decision was already forming. "I won't turn my back on them." The words came out firm, definitive. The same tone he used in boardrooms when closing multi-million-dollar deals, but this wasn't about money or contracts. This was about 2 children who shared his blood, and a woman who was trusting him with the most precious things in her world. Olivia's shoulders visibly relaxed, as if she'd been holding her breath for months. "Thank you," she whispered. "But I need to do this right," Philip continued, his mind already shifting into planning mode. "I'll need time to arrange things properly, legally, financially, practically. There are steps we have to take." He pressed his intercom. "Tessa, I need you to clear my schedule for the rest of the day. Also, please arrange for the executive suite on the 72nd floor to be prepared immediately. 3 occupants, indefinite stay." Olivia looked surprised. "Mr. Kingsley, You're not going back to wherever you came from today," Philip said. "Not until we have a plan. Daniel and Amelia deserve better than uncertainty, and you deserve support during this process." He walked over to where the children sat, crouching down to their level for the first time. Up close, the resemblance was undeniable. Daniel had his grandmother's nose, Philip's grandmother, a woman these children would never meet. Amelia's determined expression mirrored his own childhood photographs. "Daniel," he said carefully, "what's your favorite dinosaur?" The boy looked up with bright eyes. "Triceratops. They had 3 horns and could defend themselves against T-Rex. Did you know they lived in herds for protection?" "I didn't know that," Philip admitted. "That's pretty smart of them." "Amelia likes ballet," Daniel offered, obviously proud of his sister. "She can do a perfect pirouette." "Can you show me?" Philip asked Amelia. The little girl stood up solemnly, positioned her feet carefully, and executed a wobbly but determined spin. When she finished, she looked at Philip expectantly. "That was beautiful," he said, and meant it. As he watched them, Philip felt the weight of responsibility settling over him like a mantle. These weren't abstract concepts or business problems to be solved. They were real children with personalities, dreams, fears, and needs. They would require patience, attention, love, things he wasn't sure he knew how to give. His phone buzzed with urgent messages from his executive team, probably wondering why their afternoon meetings had been canceled. Stock prices needed monitoring. Contracts required reviewing. International calls were waiting. His empire demanded constant attention. But right now, watching Daniel carefully color within the lines of his dinosaur drawing and Amelia adjust her stuffed rabbit's position for the 3rd time, Philip realized that everything he'd thought was important might be about to change. "We'll take this one step at a time," he told Olivia. "I'll have my lawyers handle the legal arrangements quietly. No media, no publicity. I want to protect their privacy while we figure this out." Olivia nodded gratefully. "They're good kids, Mr. Kingsley. They just need someone to believe in them." Philip looked at his children. The word still felt foreign, but increasingly right, and made a silent promise. Whatever came next, whatever complications arose, whatever sacrifices were required, he would not let them face the world alone. The businessman in him was already calculating risks and planning strategies, but the father in him, a part he was just discovering, was simply trying to figure out how to keep 2 small hearts from breaking. The first week was like learning a completely new language. Philip had mastered international finance, corporate strategy, and global economics. He could negotiate with heads of state and close billion-dollar deals before lunch. But asking a 6-year-old what she wanted for breakfast felt like the most complicated conversation of his life. "Do you like pancakes?" he asked Amelia on their third morning together. She studied him seriously, her head tilted in consideration. "Are they the fluffy kind or the flat kind? And do you have the syrup that looks like real maple trees?" Philip realized he had no idea what his own kitchen contained. He'd been eating business lunches and catered dinners for so long that breakfast had become coffee and whatever Tessa ordered for him. "Let's find out together," he said, and watched Amelia's face light up with the kind of joy that came from shared adventures. Daniel was easier to connect with initially. The boy's fascination with dinosaurs gave Philip something concrete to work with. He found himself spending his lunch breaks researching Jurassic period facts instead of reviewing quarterly projections. "Did you know that velociraptors were actually only about the size of turkeys?" Daniel announced during their fourth dinner together. "The movies made them way too big." "Really? That's fascinating. What made them so dangerous then?" "Their intelligence and pack-hunting strategies, they were basically the tactical geniuses of the dinosaur world." Philip found himself genuinely impressed by Daniel's knowledge and analytical thinking. The boy approached his prehistoric interests with the same systematic thoroughness that Philip applied to business problems. It was like looking at a miniature version of his own mind at work. With Amelia, the connection took longer, but ran deeper. She was cautious, observant, testing every interaction to see if this new adult in her life could be trusted. Philip watched her practice ballet in the makeshift studio he'd set up in the executive suite, noting how she demanded perfection from herself in every movement. "You're very hard on yourself," he observed after watching her repeat the same sequence 5 times. "Mama says good things take practice," Amelia replied, "and if you're going to do something, you should do it right." There it was, his own relentless pursuit of excellence reflected in a 6-year-old's determination to nail a perfect arabesque. She had inherited his refusal to accept mediocrity, but wrapped it in the patient persistence that reminded him of Olivia. Balancing his empire with fatherhood proved more challenging than any corporate merger he'd ever managed. Board meetings were interrupted by phone calls checking on homework completion. International conference calls happened while he helped Amelia practice her ballet positions. His assistants learned to schedule around bedtime stories and dinosaur documentaries. "Sir, the Tokyo markets opened an hour ago," Tessa reminded him one morning as he sat on the floor, building a Lego paleontology dig site with Daniel. "The Tokyo markets will have to wait," Philip replied, carefully placing a tiny Lego T-Rex skeleton. "We're making an important archaeological discovery here." His executives began to notice changes. Philip left meetings at exactly 6 p.m. now, no matter what was being discussed. His phone calls became shorter, more focused. He delegated responsibilities he'd previously insisted on handling personally. "You seem different," his CFO mentioned during a strategy session. "More present." Philip realized it was true. For the first time in decades, his attention wasn't scattered across a dozen simultaneous priorities. When he was with Daniel and Amelia, he was completely there, not thinking about stock prices or merger opportunities, just focused on being the father they needed. The breakthrough moment came 3 weeks after their first meeting. Philip was reading to them before bed, a nightly ritual that had become the highlight of his day. Amelia was curled up on his left side, Daniel on his right, both of them drowsy and content. As he finished the story about a brave little mouse who saved her family, Amelia looked up at him with sleepy eyes. "Are you going to be our daddy now?" The question hung in the air like the most important contract he'd ever been asked to sign. Philip felt his throat tighten, understanding that his answer would shape these children's entire understanding of security and belonging. "Yes, Amelia," he said softly, "I am." She smiled and hugged him with the fierce intensity that only children can manage. "Good, I was hoping you would be." Daniel, not to be outdone by his sister's emotional moment, added, "Does this mean you'll come to my school's dinosaur presentation next week?" "I wouldn't miss it for anything," Philip promised. In that moment, surrounded by the warmth of 2 small bodies trusting him completely, Philip understood what had been missing from his perfectly controlled life. All his success, all his wealth, all his power, none of it compared to the simple joy of being needed by these two remarkable children. If this story is reminding you why family connections matter more than any achievement, share it with someone who needs to hear about the power of unexpected love. The businessman who had entered this relationship as a matter of responsibility was discovering something he'd never expected: that being a father wasn't just about providing for Daniel and Amelia. It was about becoming the man they deserved to have as their dad. The story broke on a Thursday morning. Phillip was helping Daniel tie his shoes for school when Tessa's emergency call shattered their peaceful routine. Her voice carried a tension he'd never heard before, even during the company's most volatile periods. "Sir, we have a situation. The New York Post is running a front-page story about you and the children. Someone photographed you at the park yesterday." Phillip's blood ran cold. He'd taken Daniel and Amelia to Central Park for what he thought was a private afternoon. Just a father spending time with his kids. Apparently, privacy was now a luxury he could no longer afford. Within hours, the media feeding frenzy began. Photographers camped outside the Kingsley Tower. News vans lined the street. Headlines screamed across every major outlet. "Billion-dollar secret twins, Kingsley's hidden family, love child scandal rocks Wall Street." The carefully constructed image Phillip had spent 20 years building was under assault from every angle. Financial reporters questioned his judgment. Gossip columnists speculated about the children's mother. Social media exploded with theories, accusations, and invasive commentary about his private life. His stock price dropped 3% in morning trading as investors worried about potential scandals affecting company stability. Board members called emergency meetings. His publicist fielded hundreds of interview requests within the first 6 hours. "We need to get ahead of this," his head of communications insisted during a hastily arranged crisis meeting. "Issue a brief statement denying everything, then wait for it to blow over." But Phillip found himself thinking about Daniel's excitement over his upcoming dinosaur presentation and Amelia's trust when she asked if he was going to be their daddy. These weren't abstract public relations problems, they were his children, and they deserved better than denial and deflection. "No," he said firmly, "we're not denying anything." His entire crisis team stared at him in shock. "Sir, if we confirm the story—" "We're going to tell the truth," Phillip interrupted. "All of it." Against every piece of professional advice he received, Phillip scheduled a press conference for the following morning. His lawyers warned him about legal implications. His board urged him to reconsider. His publicist practically begged him to let the story die naturally. But as he watched Daniel and Amelia eating breakfast, blissfully unaware of the chaos surrounding them, Phillip realized that protecting them meant more than protecting his reputation. The press conference room was packed beyond capacity. Cameras flashed as Phillip approached the podium, knowing that his next words would define not just his public image, but his children's understanding of how their father handled adversity. "Recently, I learned that I am the father of two remarkable children," he began, his voice steady and clear. "Their mother, Olivia Marston, is facing serious health challenges. I am committed to supporting her and to being a father to Daniel and Amelia. I ask for privacy and respect during this difficult time." The questions came fast and aggressive. "Why didn't you know about them sooner? Are you paying child support? Is this a publicity stunt? What about your company's reputation?" Phillip answered each one with unprecedented honesty, refusing to hide behind corporate speak or legal technicalities. He talked about responsibility, about children deserving stability, about doing what was right, regardless of personal cost. In our age of social media and instant judgment, how do you handle it when your most private moments become public entertainment? When protecting the people you love means exposing yourself to criticism from strangers who don't know your story? The press conference changed everything. Some praised his honesty, others questioned his judgment. But for the first time in his public life, Phillip wasn't performing for the cameras. He was simply being a father who refused to be ashamed of his children. The months that followed the press conference brought a bittersweet rhythm to their lives. While Phillip navigated the public scrutiny and learned to balance fatherhood with his empire, Olivia faced her own battle with quiet dignity. Her condition progressed faster than anyone had hoped. The neurological symptoms began subtly. Occasional difficulty finding words during conversations. Slight tremors in her hands when she helped Amelia with her hair. But Olivia approached each new challenge with the same grace she'd shown when walking into Philip's office that first day. "I want to see them settle in with you," she told Philip during one of their evening conversations while the children did homework. "I want to know they feel safe before—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. They both understood the timeline they were working with. Philip arranged for the best medical care available, bringing specialists from around the world to consult on Olivia's treatment. But even unlimited resources couldn't slow what was happening to her body. What they could do was ensure she spent her remaining time surrounded by love and dignity. The children adapted with the resilience that only they possess, though their understanding of what was happening evolved gradually. Daniel threw himself deeper into his studies, as if academic achievement could somehow solve the problem his brilliant mind couldn't fix. Amelia became more attentive to her mother, offering spontaneous hugs and staying close during difficult days. "Why is Mama so tired all the time?" Amelia asked Philip one evening as they prepared dinner together. "She's fighting something very hard inside her body," Philip explained carefully. "It makes her tired, but it doesn't change how much she loves you. Are you going to take care of us when she can't anymore?" The directness of children's questions never ceased to amaze him. "Yes, sweetheart, always." Olivia found deep comfort in watching the bond strengthen between Philip and the children. She saw Daniel explaining complex dinosaur theories to his father with growing confidence, and witnessed Amelia performing impromptu ballet shows in Philip's office during weekend visits. "You're becoming exactly the father they need," she told him one afternoon as they watched the children play in the park. Her speech was slower now, more deliberate, but her meaning was clear. "I'm trying to be worthy of what you've given me," Philip replied. "You already are." The transition happened gradually, then all at once. Olivia moved into the executive suite permanently, so the children could maintain their routines while staying close to her. Philip rearranged his schedule completely, conducting meetings from home and delegating more responsibilities than ever before. During her final weeks, Olivia made sure to have individual conversations with each child. She recorded bedtime stories for future nights when they might need her voice. She wrote letters for important moments she wouldn't be there to witness: first days of school, graduations, weddings. "I want them to know how proud I am of who they're becoming," she told Philip. "And I want them to understand that loving someone doesn't end just because they're not physically present anymore." On a quiet Sunday morning in late spring, surrounded by Daniel's dinosaur drawings taped to the walls and Amelia's ballet shoes placed carefully by the window, Olivia passed away peacefully in her sleep. Philip was holding her hand. The children were curled up on either side of her bed, having fallen asleep during their morning story time. The last thing she heard was Daniel reading aloud from his favorite book about brave triceratops protecting their families. In those final moments there was no fear, no regret, no unfinished business. There was only a mother who had successfully ensured her children would be loved and protected, and a father who had discovered that the greatest legacy wasn't measured in stock prices or business achievements. It was measured in the trust of two small hearts who would carry her love forward while building new bonds with the man who had promised to catch them when they fell. Olivia had kept her children safe until the very end. Now it was Philip's turn to honor that gift. 3 months after Olivia's funeral, Philip sat in his office reviewing architectural plans for a new building. But this wasn't another corporate headquarters or luxury development. This was something entirely different. Something that would ensure Olivia's values lived on long after her physical presence had ended. The Olivia Marston Foundation would occupy a full city block, designed specifically to support single parents facing terminal illnesses. The facility would provide legal assistance, childcare planning, emotional support, and most importantly, help families navigate the complex process of ensuring children's futures were secure. "She would have loved this," Daniel said, studying the blueprints spread across Philip's desk. At 7 years old, he was already showing the analytical mind that made him so much like his father. but his compassion was pure Olivia. "Why are you building it so big?" Amelia asked, her ballet shoes dangling from the chair as she examined the plans. "Because there are a lot of families who need help the same way we needed help," Phillip explained. "Your mother taught me that taking care of people isn't just about having money. It's about making sure no one faces difficult times alone." The foundation became Phillip's new passion project, but it was more than just charitable giving. He restructured his entire approach to business, incorporating Olivia's belief that success meant lifting others up rather than simply accumulating wealth. Grief affected each of them differently. Daniel channeled his emotions into learning, devouring books about everything from advanced paleontology to child psychology, as if understanding the world could somehow make sense of loss. Amelia expressed herself through movement, creating dances that told stories about memories with her mother. Phillip learned to recognize when they needed space to process and when they needed distraction. Some evenings called for quiet conversations about missing Olivia. Other nights required building elaborate Lego cities or staging impromptu living room ballet performances. "I had a dream about Mama last night," Amelia announced during breakfast one morning. "She said she was proud of how we're taking care of each other." "What else did she say?" Phillip asked gently. "That families aren't just about being together in the same place. They're about carrying love with you wherever you go." The foundation's first facility opened 18 months later. Phillip insisted that Daniel and Amelia cut the ribbon, explaining to the gathered crowd that this building existed because of their mother's courage and their willingness to trust a stranger who turned out to be their father. Local news covered the opening, but this time the media attention felt different. Instead of invasion and speculation, it was a celebration of something meaningful being created from tragedy. Olivia's values had become the foundation's guiding principles. Treat every family with dignity, provide practical help alongside emotional support, and never let bureaucracy get in the way of helping children in need. Through supporting other families facing similar challenges, Phillip discovered that honoring Olivia's memory wasn't about preserving the past. It was about building a future where her compassion could multiply exponentially. The woman who had walked into his office with 2 secrets had left behind a legacy that would protect countless other children. 5 years later, the transformation was complete. Daniel, now 12, had developed into a confident young man who could discuss advanced scientific concepts with university professors while still maintaining the wonder that made him special. His room was filled with fossil replicas, geology books, and acceptance letters from 3 different summer paleontology programs designed for gifted students. "Dad, did you know that new research suggests some dinosaurs were actually warm-blooded?" he announced over dinner, his enthusiasm unchanged from those early days in Phillip's office. "Tell me more about that," Phillip replied, genuinely interested in his son's latest discovery. Amelia, at 11, had blossomed into a poised young dancer who performed with the same perfectionist drive that characterized both her parents. But unlike Phillip's childhood pursuit of excellence, hers was tempered with joy and creativity. She choreographed pieces that told stories, combining technical skill with emotional expression. "My dance teacher says I have natural leadership qualities," she reported proudly. "I've been helping the younger students with their positions." Phillip smiled, recognizing Olivia's nurturing spirit expressing itself through their daughter's actions. The man who had once scheduled his life in 15-minute increments now built his entire routine around school plays, science fairs, and dance recitals. Board meetings moved to accommodate parent-teacher conferences. International business trips were planned around family vacations. And his executives had initially worried about his decreased availability, but the results spoke for themselves. Phillip's decision-making had become more decisive, his leadership more authentic. The company's culture shifted toward work-life balance, and productivity actually increased when employees felt supported in their personal lives. The Olivia Marston Foundation had helped over 2,000 families navigate end-of-life planning, while ensuring children's futures remained secure. Each success story reminded Phillip of how one woman's courage had created ripples of positive change that extended far beyond their own family. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Mom hadn't come to see you that day?" Daniel asked during one of their weekend hiking trips. Philip considered the question seriously. "I think about it sometimes, but I also think your mother was brave enough to do what was right, regardless of how difficult it was." "She was pretty amazing," Amelia added, "and she chose well when she picked you to be our dad." Think about the people who have shaped your life through difficult but necessary conversations. Have you ever had someone show up unexpectedly and completely change your understanding of what was possible? The billionaire who had once measured success in stock prices and quarterly profits now understood that his greatest achievement walked beside him on hiking trails, called him Dad, and trusted him with their dreams for the future. One honest conversation had indeed shattered his perfect life and given him a real one. What can we learn from Phillip Kingsley's story? Sometimes the moments that threaten to destroy our carefully planned lives are actually delivering our greatest gifts. Philip thought he had everything under control: wealth, power, respect, a perfectly managed existence. But perfection, as it turns out, can be a prison that keeps us from experiencing what really matters. When Olivia walked into that office with Daniel and Amelia, she wasn't just bringing news that would complicate Philip's world. She was offering him the chance to discover a part of himself he never knew existed. The father he was capable of becoming had been waiting inside the businessman all along. The truth is, responsibility doesn't always feel like a burden when it comes wrapped in love. What started as Philip's obligation to support 2 children he'd never known became the source of his deepest joy and most meaningful purpose. Here's what makes this story so powerful. Olivia's courage to speak an uncomfortable truth changed not just one family, but thousands of others through the foundation that bears her name. One honest conversation created ripples of positive change that continue spreading years later. Think about your own life for a moment. What would you do if faced with Philip's choice? When unexpected responsibility shows up at your door, do you see burden or opportunity? Have you ever discovered that what seemed like a complication was actually a blessing in disguise? If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and let me know in the comments. Have you ever had a moment when someone's honesty completely changed your life's direction? Share this video with someone who needs to hear about the power of stepping up when it matters most. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, because life's most meaningful stories are the ones that remind us what truly matters. At exactly 10:47 a.m. on that Tuesday morning, a woman entered a billionaire's office carrying 2 secrets. She left behind a legacy that proved sometimes the most beautiful lives are built from the pieces of our shattered plans. The confession that destroyed Philip's perfect world gave him something infinitely better, a real one.